Hi, afternoon, everyone.
Hello,
Please
everyone.
feel free to put your cameras on and unmute yourselves if you want to and say hi. That's not a problem. We like to see faces where we can.
Hello.
Hi, Heather. Hi,
Hiya, how you
Pete.
doing?
Hi, how you doing? You all right?
Hiya.
We do have a few more people registered, so we'll give it a minute and just see if anyone else joins in, because people usually are always a little bit late on these things, especially over lunchtime. And then we'll get cracking. I'll sort of do introductions and then we'll get started if that's all right.
Okay.
Amazing. Yeah, so I've got a few. I think people can actually just drop straight in, actually, because I think I set it so that if you had the meeting invite, you could actually just drop into the meeting. So we shouldn't need to manage the waiting room too much there, Sarah. So that's fine.
Great.
So we'll get a start, and I'm sure people will drop in as they go through. I've asked Sarah to come and talk to you guys today. So we do a series of different lunch and learn stuff throughout the course of the year. We've done lots of different topics. Sarah is kind of a wellbeing expert. She specialises in things like burnout and stress as well. So super experienced in that regard. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the wellbeing kind of strategies and things that you might want to be looking out for in the organisation. I am going to record the session if that's okay with everyone. If anyone objects to it, please just let me know in the chat in private. It's just purely for our YouTube channel so that we can share it with people that didn't attend, that were registered, that might want to obviously have a look at what goes on. But I am going to kind of keep my mouth shut for the rest of the session, which is very unusual for me, and hand over to Sarah so that she can go through it all with you. And obviously, if you want to take Sarah's contact details or anything at the end, if you want to explore things a little bit further with her, absolutely feel free. I think Sarah will also share some of the material with you as well, so that you've got it afterwards. I guess if you want to ask questions throughout, then Sarah will guide you on whether she wants those on the chat or whether she wants them verbal, or what the case is. But I will hand over to you now, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Claire. Welcome, everybody. How's everyone feeling today? Can I get a little bit of a thumbs up, thumbs a bit? Great. It's great to be here with you. And thank you, Claire, for inviting me to have this conversation. I will share the PowerPoint presentation straight away. So we can get started. I think it's this one. Let's see. So, can everyone see this? Yeah? Okay, great. So if I won't be able to see people on the screen, so maybe if somebody needs to unmute for any reason, just unmute and let me know, because I'll be kind of moving from screen to presentation. So I want to welcome you here again today. Thank you for coming during your lunchtime. My name is Sarah, and I am a stress and burnout coach and mentor. I'm also a health creation at work consultant, which I'll explain a little bit more what that's about later on. It's essentially a holistic way of looking at workplace well-being for you personally as an individual and also your team. And I've also been a yoga teacher for a long time, longer than I've been a coach, for over 10 years. And what I want to do today is spend about 30 minutes or so, hopefully, giving you a clear picture of what workplace well-being is. And the reason for this is that there is a lot of confusion around what workplace well-being is. You might have your own idea. You might have your own things that you are already working with within your organization. But what I want for you today is to basically walk away with clarity. And the reason is that what we know now as workplace well-being information has evolved over the years is that a lot of the things that organizations have been doing, which have been based on recommendations, actually haven't worked. And so what I'm really interested in is equipping people and teams and businesses with information that actually works, so that you can walk away and start to think about the things that you have in place, what things you might like to establish, and whether or not you might want further support with making those things happen within your organization. So that's the plan for today. The way I was thinking to cover this is as follows. Where I'd like to start is how well-being basically became a nice to have. And you'll see from my presentation that it's basically become, based on recommendations, a bolt-on that people put onto the workplace rather than a foundation within the workplace. And based on that, I want to talk about 3 myths that I think are commonly talked about regarding workplace well-being. And from there, once we look at the myths, we'll be able to look at what workplace well-being actually is, why it actually matters for performance, what works in practice, and what all the research that has been done in the past 20 years has basically now told us this is what works in practice and how we can help. And with that, I'll tell you a little bit more about the specific workplace well-being work that I do through the Health Coaching at Work program. And you're more than welcome to have questions. Maybe just save them for the end, if that's okay. And that way we'll have a little bit of a conversation when, if you want to, towards the end of the presentation, if that sounds all right. So this is the question that I'd like to start with before we get into the nitty-gritty, into the myths, into the evidence. It's about what you personally as an individual, but maybe you as a representative of your organization, think about what workplace well-being is. And for me, this all starts with honesty. There aren't any wrong answers here. We want to get very clear about what workplace well-being is. So I'm just wondering, posing the question out to you, which you're welcome to share in this chat if you wish. Do you think well-being is a perk? One of those things that companies offer as like a tick box exercise? Is it something more like a performance driver, something you genuinely believes will drive the productivity and output of your business and your employees? Is it a nuisance, that thing that you think, oh, it's just a bit of extra work that we all have to do, that's just adding and piling on to all the work we already have? Or is it something that you sense is deeper, in the sense that, do you feel like it's something that is important, but you don't know quite how to get there or how to articulate? So maybe take a little moment, have a reflection there, and I'll check in the chat if anyone wants to share anything around that. If you want to share a little bit more about what you think it is, basically, or what it's been in your company. It would be useful to help me kind of guide the conversation, I suppose. Let's see. I've tuned into the chat. I'll give you a couple more moments. I love that. It's about making people feel valued. Heather, I feel like we're already very aligned. Very, very aligned. Okay, this prompts me well for what I'm about to share. I love it. Love it. A couple more shares coming up. Let's see. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'll be sipping my Lemsip in between shares. But feeling okay. I've taken some breaks over the last couple of days, so that's been okay. Oh, here we go. Something deeper. We want staff to feel valued, but also support mental health and well-being and support staff work shifts. Fantastic. This is going to underpin some of the things I'm going to also talk about. So this is already moving in the right direction. And obviously, I'm assuming a lot with this presentation because I didn't know who was going to come. So it might be that a lot of the information for you is more like a revision today. There might be things that you already know, but I am still hoping that you might walk away with new information. I think for us, we're just such a small business, 7 of us, one of us kicks. Yes, absolutely. Learning how one another works to see triggers. Yeah, absolutely. Teamwork. Staff engagement and supportive culture. Okay, so trauma and helping them work well and enjoy their work, be present in their work too. Fantastic, really great contributions. Thank you. That kind of helps me to get a sense of where everybody is. Okay, so now that we've set that first element, let's move on to how well-being became a nice to have. And I really like starting here because there's been an evolution in workplace well-being. So if there is confusion in this space about what it is and what we're supposed to be doing, That's not your fault. It's normal. It's because for 20 years, workplace well-being has been something that has been bolted on to jobs that haven't really changed. And what that has looked like, because it was the recommendation that was given to us from all those years ago, it looked like things like putting fruit bowls out and having yoga and wellness apps and, well-being weeks and, employee assistance programs. And what I want to be clear about here is that this isn't a way to say whatever you've been doing is wrong. That isn't, and you'll see from the evidence that it's not necessarily wrong. It's just that the information and the evidence has sort of moved along. So if you have been doing some of these things, that's great. To me, what that shows as a coach and a consultant is that that is a sign that you care. And you're here in this presentation because you have an interest in this. You have an interest in well-being for your teams, and you care enough to help guide your team towards better health, which also means more productivity, better outcomes for your business, a healthier business, essentially. What's really interesting when we look at what's been done, which has been a lot in the examples I've just given, and where we are now, if we look at the column on the right, is that in 2024 and 2025, we have seen nearly 1 million UK workers affected by things like stress, depression, and anxiety, which is a record high. And in terms of lost days in the UK, in terms of productivity, for 2024-25, we were at 22.1 million, which is almost a third in a single year. These numbers are staggering. And if you look at this data and you relate it to all of these well-being initiatives, which are well-intentioned, that have been evolving and growing over the years, you think, well, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between all the offerings that we have and how people are actually feeling at work and how stress and anxiety and burnout are increasing. And what that says is we need to ask deeper questions. That's what it says to me, because if we're investing in all of these things, but people are more stressed, what's going on here? Is there something that we're not doing right? Or are we not doing the right thing potentially? So it's more of a question for us to kind of start to see what is actually working and what isn't. And that's exactly what I'm here to sort of share with you, and hopefully what together we can start to look at to help to fix. So this leads on to the first myth that I want to talk about today. So I mentioned there's going to be 3. The first one, and probably the most common one that I encounter, is that well-being equals perks, which is basically what I just presented on the previous slide. That if you've put on a resilience workshop or you have a mindfulness app, you're covered. The evidence, which I just said, has evolved and progressed over the last 20 years, is now basically showing, and this is from a study that came from Oxford University specifically, that over the study of 233 organizations, which amounted to 46,000 plus UK workers, there was no measurable well-being benefit from individual level interventions. And this was one of the largest studies conducted in this country so far. So essentially what that means is it doesn't necessarily mean that those things don't work. They might point individuals towards things that can help them, but they haven't been able to measure it in any significant way to be able to say these things actually work. We should definitely be doing them, except for one thing, one intervention, which might surprise everyone. It definitely surprised me when I saw it, which is volunteering. So volunteering was the only single intervention that they could measure actually helps in terms of a workplace perk that you can have that actually works for people's well-being. The reason why researchers think this is because volunteering gives something to people that they can't always necessarily find in the workplace, which is a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging and connection, and a sense that they're genuinely contributing to something. So what we're starting to see is that there's something a little bit deeper about the things and the dynamics and the relationships that happen within the workplace that actually influence how well our teams and our employees are performing. So the perks are there, they might signpost, but they also require that people go and do them. And sometimes having that accountability is something that us as humans, we all find very difficult to do. So even though they can help individually, potentially, on a workplace kind of setting, it's very difficult to measure this. So we just don't know. The second myth I want to talk about, and I know one or two of you maybe mentioned it already in the chat, is around well-being being about mental health only. And obviously, I want to be really clear here. Having well-being support in the workplace is absolutely brilliant and absolutely important. Yes. So I'm not suggesting that it shouldn't be there. It should absolutely be there. However, this myth is around, well-being is just about mental health. It's not. The reality is that there are 5 other factors that contribute to a person's overall sense of well-being. So this is multidimensional. And that includes physical well-being, social well-being, purpose, which relates to this idea of volunteering I just mentioned, financial well-being, and environment. So mental health is just one strand within like an ecosystem of things that help people. And this is supported by evidence from and research from the CIPD, as well as the Wellbeing Research Center. So what we're looking at now, and this is where workplace well-being starts to get a little bit complex, is that it includes different cogs. It's different things that people kind of are experiencing that determine whether they are feeling well or not at work. And they can be, at work, but they can also be outside of work. So if you have, mental health first aiders at work, that's fantastic. But if people are also financially stressed, you're only working on one of the strands, essentially. It's like, you have a chair with 3 legs that are working, but 1 leg isn't working, so the whole system has to work. So maybe with this, you can start to kind of think about your own dynamics at work and what you see in your people and where you might be seeing where those well-being gaps might be. So I'm hoping that some of this is kind of stimulating your thinking as we go through it. The third myth I wanted to talk about, which I felt was really relevant for this conversation, because obviously Claire has brought us together today, is this idea that well-being is HR's job. If you have a head of people, if you have a well-being policy, if you have a strategy document, then that's it. We don't do anything else. We don't need to do anything else. And that framework, again, in the same way that it's important to have mental health support, that framework of policies and strategies and head of people, those things are important, but they're just the framework. And many HR teams are doing an incredible work to help to support the well-being of people. But here's where the evidence gets, I find this part really, really fascinating, because that's where you start to see what we actually say at work and what our employees are actually thinking. So there's a research that was done by Gallup. This is global, a global research that says that it's managers and not HR who account for around 70% of the variance in employee engagement. And what that means is that the quality of someone's experience at work is determined by their relationship with their manager, not the well-being policy. So the role of managers is very, very important. And we're going to look at this in a few slides' time as well, when we start to look about practical things. But here's where it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable. And when I first learned this statistic, I was like, well, duh, like the interventions are so clear based on this. The CIPD's 2025 report, and some reports before that as well, basically say that 74% of HR teams say that senior leaders have well-being on the agenda. So that's not the issue. Like more than half of employers say, yeah, we want well-being to be a thing within our company, and we're doing things about it. But then what we see through the evidence is that only 27% of workers feel that mental health, if we're looking at mental health in particular, is genuinely prioritized, which means there's a 47-point gap between what the leadership says is happening and what employees are actually experiencing. So that gap, to me, is not necessarily an HR problem, if the documents and the policies are there. It's a problem with the understanding that leadership has around how people are doing and what well-being is, and what the culture is and what the employees are actually experiencing. And that gap is not something that HR can resolve on its own, basically. And so the point, I think, of this slide is to think about this as a complex ecosystem that is collective, and it's a collective responsibility that is shaped by managers, senior leadership, alongside HR. So HR is your friend in kind of putting these structures together, but it's very important that managers and senior leaders are involved in that process as well of creating workplace well-being. Okay. So now that we've established all of that and looked at the myths, I want to look at what workplace well-being actually is. And so if it's not perks, if it's not just mental health, and it's not just HR's job, what is it? The CIPD defines it in this way. So an employer needs to ensure that its culture, leadership, which I've just spoken about, and people management are the bedrock on which to build a fully integrated well-being approach. So that's structural. For me, that starts to look at a system, not just a bolted on well-being perk, but a system. And that's why well-being is more a property of that system rather than something that you just attach, like a nice to have, right? And what's interesting is that UK regulation actually has established this since 2004. So this has been in place for a long time, along 6 factors. And I want to run through these factors with you, because again, I'll do it in a form of question so you can start to think about the things that are happening around your own workplace. So these 6 factors that UK regulation places squarely on UK employers are demands. So is the workload of your staff manageable? Control. Do people have a say in how they do their work? Support. Do they have the resources and the encouragement that they need? Relationships. Are they working, are working relationships within the workplace obviously healthy and respectful? Role. Do people understand what's expected for them in their roles? Is that communicated to them in a clear way? And change, which is a big one, which is around, when change happens, which it does in companies, and we know at the moment with a lot of layoffs and things that are happening, there's a lot of change in the horizon. Is that change communicated well and managed well as a result? So these are not simple things. They are complex. I understand that. And within a really busy environment, I can understand how lots of things get missed. But this is what UK regulation now places solely on the employer. So we're starting to look at more of a system that works together, not just a bolted on program. Okay. All right. Let's take a little pause. Let's take a collective breath together. I'm just looking at the time, which is passing by very, very quickly. I would invite you to maybe take a little pause here and reflect on one thing that you have found valuable or have learned so far about this conversation. So you don't have to share it if you don't want to, but I'm a coach at heart, which means that I like to take moments where people can actually, think about what is being said and have a moment to integrate it. So have a little moment to think. And if you do want to share anything in the chat, please do. If not, I'll move on because time is going by very quickly. All right. Okay. So for this next bit, I want to help to start to think about more practical things. So obviously we've addressed some of the things that are a bit more theoretical and evidence-based. And it's important to think, or the approach that I take as a consultant and a coach is to look at both people and systems. So individuals and teams and organization. And what I find when workplaces are starting to think about, what they might do about workplace well-being, they think, well, where do I even start? How do I know what my people need? How do I know where the changes need to be made? Like, how do we do this? And this is where I like to say that your people are basically your greatest asset. Because if you understand how your people are doing at work and what they're struggling with, you can use that almost like as a diagnostic instrument to understand what is working, where the pressure points are, and what isn't working, and what the opportunities for the organization are. And I'll talk a little bit more about that detail around body, mind, and spirit means in a moment within the health creation at work model. But essentially what I want to kind of point to is the opportunity. Like, what is the opportunity for you as an organization if you take care of your people? And obviously we want to take care of people because we care about them, because we're humans and we want people to thrive. And we want to take care of people because we want the organization to also do well. When you take care of your people and your teams, what that reveals is things like, if people are experiencing stress and fatigue, on an organizational level, what that can tell us is things around workload, hours, demands. If assessing your team reveals that there's issues with like purpose or engagement drop, maybe it's about management quality or role design. If there's a lot of sickness absence, for example, or substance abuse, which we see in some industries and sectors, quite heavy substance abuse, then maybe it's an operational thing. Maybe it's the schedules. Again, maybe a little bit of workload. Maybe there's stuff going on at home. If there's isolation and disconnection, maybe it's a team structure thing, hybrid design, leadership styles. So what this slide is basically looking to show is that when we take a human-led approach to building a healthy team, we also take that same health approach towards the business itself, and your people are your greatest asset, essentially. And when you support them, when you support the people, you're also supporting the whole ecosystem. Okay. And I want to spend a few minutes very quickly just mentioning 3 pieces of research here, which I find really fascinating and interesting and thought-provoking. The reason why I like to share this is because I don't know exactly what roles you have in your organizations. My sense is that maybe some of you are founders or CEOs or directors. Some of you might be employees. I don't know, or managers. But it's very easy to make the human argument, right? Like, the human argument is compelling. We care about people. We want them to be well because somewhere deeply we understand that if people are well and happy, the business is also well and happy. But sometimes if you're not in a position of responsibility, maybe it's your responsibility to make the case, the business case, to your leadership team, to your board, to your finance director of why this is important. And typically that means showing numbers and showing figures. So these are the 3 findings. The first one, which is a global one, it's not a UK only one, but it's interesting to have in mind, again, comes from the Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre. And basically they studied 1,600 companies, and those firms showed that, firms with higher employee well-being essentially had higher profitability. So they saw a correlation between better well-being means more profit. As simple as that. The other research finding I wanted to bring, which I find really interesting because it's very UK specific, it was quite a big research project also done in the UK. Sorry, I lost my slide there. I'm back. Was done with BT call center workers over 6 months. And that study showed that 1 point increase in weekly well-being for those workers directly correlated and linked into a 12% productivity increase. And these are things that, like, at a business level, we can track and we can monitor, and we can give you those figures if you have, some figures that we can track together. And that's measurable. It's direct, it's causal, and it's a very clear finding. 1 point increase in well-being means more productivity at 12%. The third one, very aspirational, I'm sure, for most of us, is this UK 4-day working week pilot. You might have heard of this one before. 61 UK companies, nearly 3,000 workers, independently evaluated by Cambridge and Boston College, basically showed that when you worked 4 days a week, burnout could be cut down by 71%. And 65% reduction in sick days. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that everyone goes into a 4-day work week, even though that sounds wonderful and aspirational. But what that reveals more deeply is something about workload. And that when workload is managed and people don't feel overpressured by the amount that they have to deliver, they don't get as sick and they get less burnt out. So that's something to also consider if you're talking about this kind of stuff for your teams or for your leadership, if you're not in a position of leadership at the moment in your company. All right, very quickly, there is a cost to not doing anything about workplace well-being, and most of us know it because we see it in our teams, we see it in ourselves. In fact, if this first statistic is right, which says that 91% of UK adults in the UK in the past year experience high levels of stress, then it means that most of us here on this call have experienced extreme or severe stress this year. And that's huge. That's like a huge number of people. It's most people in the country, or most UK working adults, essentially. And that's a staggering statistic, and it's important to know it, because on the human level, that produces a lot of fallback in terms of illness, chronic illness, burnout, terrible consequences on that level. On the organizational level, sickness absence is at 9.4 days per employee per year, which is also huge, is the highest it's been in more than 15 years. So people are unwell and they're having to take time off. And we're very much, I'm not originally British, as you can tell, but we're very much a kind of keep calm, carry on sort of culture. But when people get to extremes of tiredness and stress that they're in, they have to take that time off. They just have to. And obviously, these are the consequences. Stress is a massive driver as well of sickness absence, and that correlates primarily to also workload, which I've already mentioned. The last piece of this is the economic one, which, at a company level might not affect you very much, but I think there's an opportunity here to also mention. 51 billion pounds every year it's costing employers for poor mental health in the workplace. On top of that, 85 million for sick days lost in relation to stress specifically. The opportunity here, though, is that improving well-being, and this comes from a statistic from McKinsey, I think, is that there is potentially roughly a 6 to 17% of UK GPD worth of value to be gained, which is roughly between £4,000 and £12,000 per employee per year, if well-being is to be improved. So the statistics are really disheartening, I have to say. But again, as a coach and somebody who works in this space, for me, that means there is an opportunity for conversation and for changing things and looking at how we can do that. So to start to kind of move towards wrapping it up, I just want to give you a quick summary of what the evidence says actually works. And because we've been looking at systems level, so organizational level, and individuals level, I'm going to tell you a little bit about both. At systems level, top of the mark is training your managers. 29% of UK organizations are actually training their managers in mental health and how to support peers and other employees. And that's quite low considering, the amount of responsibility managers have. And the CIPD agrees with this statistics as well. So training your managers is at the top of the list, is probably the most important. Managing workload for your staff. Not surprising finding, because we're all very overworked and we all probably feel that. But the data clearly says that this is where people are breaking. And workload, from a coaching and consultant perspective, is something that can be managed. It's in your control, really. But it needs strategic and creative thinking, I'm sure. The third one and the fourth one tend to surprise people a little bit. It's more about around giving people a say. So giving individuals more control around how they work and when they work, because it actually helps their performance. And that can feel a bit difficult to do, to give more autonomy. But when you give more autonomy to your employees, you're also giving them respect, and you're showing them that you trust them. So that's also one that shows really good outcomes. The last and fourth one is designing with your employees and not at them, meaning helping them to be involved in how they do their work. And that helps to basically improve performance. So the first two might feel very obvious. The second two are a little bit like, oh, that's surprising, maybe. I mean, it certainly was for me when I read the evidence. But it makes sense on a human level, because if you give people that sort of respect and autonomy and trust, you get that back, because most people are trying to do a good job for you. Right. Okay. So quickly, what actually works on a human level? This is where the health creation model comes in. It's a holistic model that looks at people's well-being under 4 pillars in relation to work, and that is through body, mind, spirit, and environment. So you can look at how somebody is moving, if they have any substance abuse, if they are eating well. You can look at their stress, their emotions, their relationship, all in the context of work. You can look at purpose. Do they feel meaning at work? Do they feel, like they belong? And then the environment in which they work, is it safe? Do they feel like they have community? And how does that community then integrate with the wider world? And so essentially, we're looking at a system that is going to both support people at a human level, and as you support the human level, you're also supporting the system as a whole. So because I'm a coach, I like to also give things that feel practical. So I want to offer you a question, which I want to pose for you. You can look at it tomorrow, you can look at it after this call, or on Monday, which is, if you could go back to your team this week or next week and ask, what is the most stressful thing about working here right now, and what is getting in the way of fixing it? Honest question. Sometimes it's hard to ask these questions because we're a little bit scared of the answers. I get that. But also there's a lot to be gained in asking honest questions, because they lead towards positive outcomes and actually fixing things, if there's things to fix, obviously. So my encouragement is to have these conversations with 1 or 2 people in your organization and see what comes up. You might start to discover some patterns that might help you to start making decisions around what your next steps might be within your organization. Last few slides. So this is the health creation at work model, which is the one under which I work, which was created by a holistic health doctor called Dr. Rosie Daniel. And essentially what we do is we start with very simple, a conversation, which I'm going to offer to all of you today. And from there, we can make an initial assessment of your team, which we call the team picture of health. And from that, those results will produce information that will help us to then go in several directions. And that can be providing support for your leaders, so your managers, for example, or the vulnerable people in your organization. But it can also lead towards things like training, And it can also lead to a more in-depth consultation where we establish teams within your organization that then help to create those deeper changes if those changes are to be made. So we always look at the system and we look at the person together. That's the model of it. And then we evaluate those results. And obviously, you know, when there are things to celebrate, outcomes to celebrate, we also celebrate them with some awards. So that's the program in a nutshell, what it looks like. And so this is your invitation. So for today, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can scan this QR code and either contact me privately on a, you know, confidentially as an individual or as an organization to talk about your own well-being, or to talk about the well-being of your organization and your team. So we can have a conversation for 45 minutes. You know, we can follow up with some more support if you wanted, but in any case, you will walk away from that conversation with some clarity around your next steps, whether it is for you or for your organization. So that's it. Thank you. That was a lot delivered in a short amount of time. I want to thank you for being present, for engaging with the ideas. Maybe some sounded a bit more controversial than others. And thank you for caring for your teams and for spending your lunchtime with me. I just want to leave you with this quote by Brian Dow, who's the CEO of Mental Health UK, and they delivered a report earlier this year around burnout. Basically, he says that burnout is not inevitable. It is the outcome of how our working environments are designed and how employees are supported. So again, we're looking at people and we're looking at environments together. And that is at the heart of what I wanted to share with you today. If you want to contact me directly, my contact details are there. So you're welcome to reach out. And I know I've gone a little bit longer than I planned to, but here's a list of resources I'm also very happy to send you if you want to read up more on this topic. And that's it. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really, really interesting. And some of those stats are quite shocking, aren't they? That opened my eyes a little bit as well. So I know obviously we're getting near to the end of the time, but does anyone have any questions quickly that they want to put to Sarah at all? Please feel free to unmute and ask away, or pop on the chat if you can't unmute for whatever reason. Oh, fantastic. I have one really quick question, Sarah, that might be helpful for people. So a lot of the clients that we work with, they're very, very small teams. And when you talk about obviously workload being an issue for people in a small team, you tend to wear lots of different hats and the workload can often be very high pressure. Do you have any quick top tips for anybody on the call today about how they could potentially manage that in a situation where maybe they're not able to alleviate that pressure instantly?
Yeah, sure. I would always start with the people approach. That would be where I would go first, because when you have that information that's coming from your team, what is it that is, you know, what feels like a lot within your work? It goes back to one of those points that came up in the evidence around like design and help and talking to people about how their work is going. If you go back and ask those questions, you'll be able to identify where those pressure points are. And I can't really say what the outcome of that conversation will be because it depends on what people come up with. But that will give you enough or it will give you information to be able to say, well, maybe it means that we need to restructure the delivery of this project, for example, if it's a project-based situation. Maybe we need to move the deadlines or the deadlines need to be reconsidered. But those things can only be done if you have that information available. Because if you're working in a vacuum of assumption of like, oh yeah, people are just really overwhelmed, but we just have to carry on, then you're working in without the information, if that makes sense. Or if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much. I think a few people are having to leave now because obviously they've got to get back to their work. So just thank you very much again. What I'll do is I'll share the link to the recording when it's up and available for everybody. You know, please do reach out to Sarah if you want to take advantage of that 45-minute free conversation about well-being for your team or even just for yourself if you need to go down that route. And yeah, we'll get some resources out to you as well. But I hope you've all enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Perfect. I will reach out to you on an email later, Sarah, if that's right, because I've got another call to get on in a minute. So
Sure. Okay.
fab.
Great. Let me know what you thought
Thank
of
you.
it.
No worries. Thank you very much. See you
Thank
later.
you.
Bye.
Bye.